I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and listened to the rain pattering on the windows. It was a typical Friday night, when all my friends went to parties or meetings, and I decided to stay home alone. Well, as I decided, I just didn't want to go out. Everyone said it was ridiculous, but I didn't pay attention. It seemed to me that I was completely safe in my apartment. The clock struck 10, and I suddenly realized that it was already quite late. I was about to turn off the TV and go to bed when I heard a strange sound. It sounded like a knock, but not like someone knocking on a door. No, this sound was much quieter, almost imperceptible. I froze, listening. Maybe it's just rain? But then I heard that sound again. It was coming from somewhere outside the window. My heart started beating faster. I slowly got up from the sofa and went to the window. Nothing suspicious. Just an empty street and cars passing by. I returned to my seat, trying to calm down. It's just imagination, I told myself. But the sound was heard again, now louder. And then I saw a shadow that flashed past the window. My hand involuntarily reached for the mobile phone. I called my friend, hoping her voice would help calm me down. But she did not answer. It seemed that I was alone, and the silence around me became more and more oppressive. The sound appeared again, but now it came not from the window, but from the door. Could it be just someone who got the address wrong? Maybe a neighbor? But my instinct told me that something was wrong. I got up, trying not to breathe, and slowly crept to the door. I listened. At first nothing. And then I heard heavy breathing from the other side. My hands shook and I tried to remember if I had locked the door. But my mind was clouded with fear. I stood in front of the door, barely breathing, trying to hear at least some sound. The breathing behind the door died down, but the feeling of danger did not go away. I slowly reached for the door window, unable to overcome my curiosity. I needed to know who was standing there. Maybe it's just one of the neighbors? I carefully bent down and looked. At first I saw nothing but a faint glimmer of light on the stairs. But then suddenly, as if out of nowhere, an eye appeared in front of the eye. I was instantly terrified and jumped back, almost falling. Someone's fingers carefully began to knock on the door. Soft but persistent knocking. My mind almost screamed at me to run, but my legs seemed to have grown to the floor. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to stay calm, but my voice sounded too weak, as if it didn't belong to me. The knocking stopped. There was an unnerving silence, so that only my own heartbeat could be heard, pounding in my ears. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts, when I heard a bone-chilling sound of someone slowly pushing on the doorknob, trying to open the door. The handle began to turn slowly, and I saw the lock wobble. At that moment I realized that the door was not locked with a chain. I rushed to the door, slamming it shut at the last moment before anyone tried to squeeze in. My fingers convulsed the lock, trying to hold it, but I felt pressure from the other side. Someone was there. And this person wanted to get inside. I clamped the lock and held the door with all my might when I heard a thump from the other side. Someone tried to break the door with their shoulder. Another blow. And one more. Now the blows became more brutal, stronger. I knew they wouldn't last long. I gasped, panicking. My heart was beating like crazy. At that moment, I remembered that there was a knife in the kitchen. But will I make it? Can I run to the kitchen before someone breaks through? I knew I only had a few seconds. With each new knock, the door shuddered more and more, and I could feel my fingers becoming stiff with a cold sweat. I looked back at the kitchen, pretending to be a distance away. It was necessary to act immediately. I suddenly let go of the door and rushed forward. The heart was pounding in the chest, as if it wanted to break out. Only a few steps separated me from the kitchen table. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find and went back to the door, bracing myself for an intruder. And then I saw that the door had already begun to open. A man tall, in dark clothes, tried to squeeze through the narrow slot that he managed to open. His eyes shone like those of a hunter tracking his prey. He looked at me and smiled. That smile was the scariest thing I'd ever seen, cold, angry, like he'd already won the game. My fingers gripped the knife tighter. I took a step back without taking my eyes off him. In his hands I noticed something shiny, a crowbar. He prepared to hit the door again, but suddenly stopped when he saw that I was armed. "Don't be silly," he said in a calm, even friendly voice, but I heard a threat in his tone. "I don't want to hurt you." I didn't answer. My mind was trying to find a way out of this situation. The man took another step towards me, and I took another step back, feeling my back pressed against the kitchen table. Anger flared in his eyes as he realized I wasn't going to obey. "Okay," he said, and suddenly lunged forward. I screamed and stabbed. I didn't know where I was aiming, I just hit at random. Feeling the resistance, I realized that I had hit. He groaned, lingering for a moment, but then jumped back, clutching his side. I was breathing heavily, shaking with fear and adrenaline. The man looked at his wounded hand and became angry. His face changed to one of hatred. "You'll pay for this," he growled as he slowly began to approach me again. And just when I thought it would be my last chance to strike again, I heard the sound of a siren somewhere in the distance. This made him stop. The man turned towards the door, his face contorted with irritation. He knew he had little time left. He looked at me again, as if remembering my face, and then rushed to the exit, quickly disappearing through the door. I stood there holding the knife, not believing what had just happened. The siren was approaching. Someone must have heard the noise and called the police. I knew one thing: I would never stay home alone again. The police arrived almost immediately after the man disappeared through the door. I still had the knife in my hand, but I didn't feel as brave as I had a few minutes ago. I was shocked and couldn't stop shaking. So many thoughts raced through his mind, but none could linger for more than a moment. I stared at the door, still swaying after his escape, and tried to steady my breathing. A few minutes later, 2 police officers entered the apartment. Their presence calmed me a little, although my fear still did not go away. One of them, a middle-aged man with a friendly face, approached me. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice was calm but strained, as if he was preparing for any answer. I nodded, but the words stuck in my throat. I finally found the strength to speak. He tried to break in," I said, my hands shaking even more. The policeman noticed the knife in my hands and gently asked me to put it on the table. "It's okay, you're safe," he said. "Can you tell us what happened?" I tried to explain everything that happened as best I could, but my thoughts were confused. The policeman listened attentively, nodded, exchanged glances with each other. They began to look around the apartment, checking every corner, looking for evidence or traces of the criminal. One of them found prints on the door and on the floor where I had apparently left a bloodstain from his injured hand. "You're very lucky someone called the police," said the second policeman, a younger one, with a stern look. "It seems your neighbors heard the commotion and didn't delay. If it weren't for them, things could have ended much worse." I nodded gratefully, but deep anxiety still lingered inside me. I thought about the neighbors. Who exactly called the police? I hardly talked to anyone in this house, except for the elderly couple across the street who always seemed friendly. Maybe it was them? The police offered to stay with someone for the night, but I didn't know who to turn to. Friends were either busy or lived too far away. Then the senior police officer suggested that I temporarily go to a hotel. I agreed. I needed time to recover, and I knew that these walls would remind me of this evening for a long time to come. They left me with a business card and phone number in case I remembered any more details. When the door closed behind them, I stood in silence, feeling how my apartment suddenly seemed foreign to me. She was no longer my refuge, a place where I could feel safe. I packed my things, took what I needed and called a taxi to the nearest hotel. When I got into the car, I looked back at my window. A cold wind lifted the curtain, and for a moment I thought I saw a shadow near the house. But when I squinted to get a better look, there was nothing there. Just emptiness and darkness. But I wasn't sure anymore if it was just my imagination or if he was really watching me, waiting for another chance. The hotel was quiet, even cozy. The walls of the room looked almost like my apartment, but I still felt uncomfortable. I tried to find peace, but fear did not leave me. All this time I felt as if someone was watching me, as if I were constantly under the crosshairs. Even here, far from home, I could not relax. Putting things on the bed, I went to the window and carefully looked out. The night was dark, the rain was still beating on the windows. Far below you could see cars speeding along the wet road. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was nearby. I closed the curtains and went back to bed. I needed to gather my thoughts, call someone, maybe friends or even my parents, but there was no way I could reach for the phone. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to force myself to calm down. I needed to sleep to recover from the shock at least a little. But sleep did not come. Every time I closed my eyes, his face reappeared in front of me, a cold smile, deep dark eyes staring at me through the socket. It seemed that this image was etched in my memory forever. I decided to turn on the TV to distract myself. The noise of the news blaring from the screen seemed soothing. I had almost stopped thinking about everything that had happened when I suddenly heard a soft sound. At first I did not pay attention to it, thinking that it was part of a television program. But the sound repeated. It was a light knock on the hotel room door. I shuddered. My hand automatically reached for the phone, but I stopped. What if it's just room service? Maybe I forgot something in the car? But I didn't make any orders. No one knew I was here except the police. The knock was repeated again. Louder this time. I went to the door and, not knowing what to do, looked through the window. My heart almost stopped when I saw who was standing on the other side.
It was the same man.
He stood there, smiling again with that creepy smile I have at home.
He found me.
I abruptly moved away from the door, not believing my eyes. How could he know I was here? Cold sweat covered my palms and I felt my heart start to beat faster. I took the phone and started dialing the number of the police. But something in me said, "You won't have time." Suddenly, the knocking turned into sharp blows. He tried to break in. I saw the door swing under his pressure. I rushed to the window, opened it, surveying the hotel parking lot below. The height was too much to just jump out, but what else was there for me? Behind me I heard how the door began to crack under the blows. I realized that I had to act immediately. My fingers were clinging to the edge of the windowsill when suddenly the door slammed open. I turned my head and saw him bursting into the room. I desperately grabbed my phone and threw it out the window, hoping someone would find it and call for help. Then I gathered all my will into a fist and started shouting at the top of my voice, trying to get the attention of anyone in the neighboring rooms. He lunged at me again, and I grabbed the nearest lamp, trying to defend myself.
But he was faster.
He hit me on the arm and the lamp flew out, hitting the wall and breaking. My back pressed against the cold windowsill and I felt fear fill my body. He came closer, and I saw in his eyes not only rage, but also some wild delight. He reached out to me as if to grab me, when suddenly footsteps were heard outside the door. Loud, fast steps. I was filled with hope. Someone heard my scream. His hand was almost touching my neck when he looked back sharply at the sound of footsteps outside the door. I saw how his face changed. For a moment uncertainty appeared on him. Maybe even fear. Someone was approaching, and he realized that he had little time left. The footsteps came closer and he took a step back. Rage flashed across his face, as if he felt something had been taken from him at the last moment. "We'll meet again," he whispered, smiling that creepy smile of his, and rushed to the door. I didn't even have time to blink an eye when he jumped out of the room, almost knocking down a person in the corridor. I ran to the door and saw him disappear around the corner of the corridor. At that moment, a man, a hotel security guard, was standing on the threshold, breathing heavily and holding a small club in his hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking around the room, which was now in disarray. I nodded, but I was so scared that I couldn't say a word. "I heard a scream and ran here," the guard continued, looking back at the corridor where the man had disappeared.
Did he run away?
"Are you sure you don't need anything?" I could barely hold back my tears. "Yeah, thanks, but he knew I was here," I said, my voice shaking.
The guard frowned.
"We'll call the police and look at the surveillance cameras. We'll find him," he assured, though there was doubt in his voice. I heard the heart in my chest gradually calm down. A sense of relief came over me, though not for long. There were only one question in my head: how did he find me? Was he following me all this time? And most importantly, what does he need? The police arrived a few minutes later. I already told my story for the second time this evening, and each time it became more realistic, as if it were a terrible movie in which I played the main role. Again they asked for a description of the criminal, what he looked like, and every detail I could recall. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to them talk about the fact that he most likely fled in a car. They were going to patrol the area around the hotel, but their faces didn't show much optimism. It was a big city, and finding someone who could disappear so easily was not easy. After the police left, I was left alone with a security guard who stayed by the door to calm me down. We were waiting to see if there would be another signal from the police, if he would go hunting again. I sat on the bed and felt for the first time how tired I was. My brain seemed to be working at its limit, reliving the moment he was standing in front of me over and over again. Time seemed to slow down, and I began to realize that even with this protection, I no longer felt safe. The gaze accidentally fell on my bag, which I threw on the floor next to the bed.
Phone. He was still there.
I took it out and saw that there were unread messages on it. From one of my friends. I opened the message and read, "Are you at the hotel? I think I saw someone outside your apartment. I wanted to make sure you were safe. Are you okay?" My heart beat faster again. How could he know? How could he know I was here? And then I understood, maybe that man wasn't just watching me. Maybe he knew more than I could imagine. Only one thing was clear: he was not going to stop. And that was just the beginning. I closed the message on my phone and felt panic rising inside me. If that man knew where I was and was watching me all this time, then my stay at the hotel would not give me any protection. I felt despair come over me. What should I do? Where should I go? The security guard noticed my concern. "Something wrong?" he asked, leaning closer to understand what was happening. I carefully showed him the message on the phone. His face grew serious. "This is not an accident," he said. "You need to get out of here. We don't know who this could be or how dangerous he is." I nodded, feeling fear wash over me from head to toe. "Can you help me get out of here?" I asked. "I don't know where to go, but it's dangerous to stay here." The security guard thought for a moment, then went to the phone on the nightstand and started calling the reception. "Get the car ready, we're leaving," he said and hung up. "We have a company car for emergencies. I'll take you somewhere else, somewhere you won't be found." We quickly gathered my things and the security guard led me through the back door of the hotel where the car was already waiting. He scanned the perimeter, then opened the back door and gestured for me to sit down. I glanced back at the hotel, feeling that this was the last time I would see this place. As soon as we got into the car, the guard locked the door and left. I sat in the back clutching my things and tried to convince myself that we were going somewhere safe. But then I noticed how the guard began to look restlessly in the rearview mirror. "What's there?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm not sure, but it looks like we're being chased," he replied, picking up speed. I looked around and saw a dark car moving behind us. She remained at a certain distance, but did not retreat. The guard looked in the mirror again, and his face darkened.
"Hold on tight," he warned.
"I'll try to break away." The car accelerated sharply, making sharp turns, trying to lose the pursuer. But the dark car was not far behind. I felt fear running through my bones.
Who was in that car?
Was it the same man who came to my room? The guard turned sharply onto a side road, and we burst into a maze of narrow streets. He drove fast and skillfully, but the pursuer still remained behind us. I felt my hands grip the seat and tried not to cry out in fear.
"A little more," muttered the guard.
But suddenly a closed street appeared in front of us.
"Dead end." "Shit," he whispered.
"Stay in the car." He jumped out of the car, pulled out his baton and stood in front of the hood, staring at the approaching dark car. My head began to spin with fear and a sense of doom. I knew something terrible was about to happen. The dark car stopped and the driver's door slowly opened.
A man came out.
I recognized him immediately.
It was him.
The same man who was chasing me all this time. He slowly approached the guard, smiling the same cold smile. "You think you can save her?" he asked calmly, as if it was just a game. "Get out of here." The guard shouted and swung his baton. But that man was faster. He dodged the blow and knocked the guard off his feet with incredible force. The guard fell to the ground and his staff fell from his hands. My pursuer turned to me. I felt my heart freeze for a moment. I saw in his eyes not only confidence, but also some crazy desire to finish my game. He approached the car, slowly, measuredly. I knew that I would not be able to escape. I felt tears begin to burn in my eyes. Suddenly, a radio rang in the guard's pocket, and I heard the voice of the police. "We found you. Reinforcements are on the way." The man froze for a moment, his face grim. He understood that there was little time left. His hands were clenched into fists, and I could see anger burning in his eyes.
"See you later," he whispered.
He rushed to his car, quickly got in and took off. A few seconds later, I heard the roar of approaching sirens. Reinforcements have arrived. I felt the tension finally subside. The police surrounded me and the guard, helping him. They assured me that I was safe now, but I knew the truth. This nightmare is not over yet. My pursuer was on the loose, and his words still echoed in my head, "I'll see you again."